Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this FA webinar around Create the Attack, the role of the central midfield player. My name's Jimmy Gilligan, and joining me this afternoon, we have two national team coaches. We have Gemma Grainger from the women's game, who is the head coach of the YDP 15 to 17 phase. Gemma has also had experience working at the PDP phase and has also had experience working with the women's senior team. Alongside Gemma, we have Justin Cochrane, who currently is the under-16s head coach of the men's national team. Justin has also had a vast experience at working at club level at Tottenham Hotspurs. Good afternoon, you two guys.
Good afternoon.
So we're going to get straight onto it, and we're going to look at the role of the central midfielder in what is Create the Attack. So if we could play the next video, that would be great. Create the Attack, we are looking in the in possession phase, and we're looking at the principles of play around creativity, support, movement, create space and penetration, and some great examples there for you to see and have a look at. Gemma, Justin, just before we move on, what would you say Create the Attack is in your environment? What does that look like?
I think for me, it's about embracing the challenge in that phase in terms of how can you create and exploit space. So in the Create the Attack phase, you're looking at how you can gain advantages. You're looking at where and how you can get your players on the ball to ultimately get into the finish the attack phase in the best possible place.
Thank you. Justin?
Yeah, it's the same really. It's just how can we get the ball to players in dangerous areas of the pitch that's going to hurt the opposition the most. So playing beyond the opposition line of pressure, especially in midfield, getting behind the opposition's midfield and trying to create chances for the forward players. So there's lots that goes into it, and it's an important part of the game.
Thank you guys. So what we're going to look at on this slide is what the challenges the game presents when in possession and creating the attack for central midfield players. If we can have a look at the next video, and Gemma's going to talk us through this once we've had a look at it.
So just as you're familiarising yourself with this video, obviously we're playing in white, and this is the senior women playing against Brazil. Okay, so just looking at that video again then, just to really highlight some of the tactical challenges that our players face, at this level and at all levels of the game. So if we could just play that video again, just looking at, so we're playing Brazil here. So in terms of the tactical challenges that our players face, so England are playing a 4-2-3-1. So the formation that we choose to play in order to do what Justin said in terms of exploiting the opposition and how we do that. So one of the tactical challenges in this game was how we used the central midfield position, and playing the 4-2-3-1 allowed us to attract the Brazil's two central midfielders. So Brazil are playing in a 4-4-2, and as you can see here, so the two holding midfielders and the 10 playing in the pocket. So the idea in this game was for our 4 and 8 position to attract the Brazil's 2 centre midfielders, so we could play in that pocket and get the 10 in the ball and get our most dangerous players in dangerous positions. So you can see how they did that. So from a tactical point of view, understanding your role and what that does to the team. So understanding what your movement does to get our players in positions where we can break the line of the back line of Brazil. So you can see that in that video. And then if you come on to the second one, we've got a second clip from the Brazil game where it's very similar. So again, if you look at the 4-2-3-1 and you look at the connection between the 4 and the 8 initially to attract players, but you can see the number 10 working in between the lines. So really, just to summarize there, and you can see the video play through. There's a few key points there around player connections. So understanding how to create space in a 4-2-3-1 when you're playing as a 4 and an 8, in a 2 with the 10 playing more advanced. You can see how the movement draws the players away from where we want to play. And, it's about exploiting, and you can see a little bit in terms of the receiving skills, but also as well the range of passing that allows us to get into that finish the attack phase. And in particularly in this game with Brazil playing a 4-4-2, the tactical challenge was how do we make the most of our 4-2-3-1 to get the number 10 on the ball in the create the attack phase.
Yeah, two really good clips, Gemma. Looking back at it, certainly on the first video, it was plain to see the way Brazil was set up, obviously trying to not allow you to come through them. How much work do you do in camp in terms of working with the girls in terms of triggers and timing of movement? Because obviously on this video here, and for the learners who are going to watch this video, I think that's really important to pick up on that as one of those really important roles for the midfield players.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely about preparing the players and almost getting the players to take ownership of recognizing, how and where they can create space and what their movement does as a consequence of that. So with these players in particular, I think it's Izzy and Jordan who are playing in the 4 and the 8, and it's understanding what their attributes are, but actually their attributes and how they fit in with the game plan. So like you said, it's about understanding where to go and how to exploit space for others in this clip particularly. So for them, especially in the first clip, it's more about their movement for others rather than their movement for themselves. And then in the second clip, it was about their movement for themselves to attract and combine to then exploit, in wide areas. So the tactical challenge for players is like you said, it's around their decision making and creating as many opportunities, both on and off the pitch, for them to see these pictures. This annotation, it clearly shows how they did it, but it's the build up to that, like you say, in training, it's about exposing them. So within your practice design, how to, gain dominance with that, that central overload, the 3v2.
I suppose, Justin, it's looking at certainly around the challenges the game presents. It's the what ifs, isn't it? You know, you know you're playing an opposition. You've done your homework on them. It'll look around the what ifs and what challenges the game will present in terms of when you are playing.
Yeah, I think you can give the players a bit of a picture, a bit of an idea, but ultimately it's up to them to make the decisions when they're on the pitch. And fortunately, we're selecting some very good players, and they, in general, they recognise what's needed at the right times, and they recognise what the opposition might be doing. They might recognise where the space is, and then they usually come up with the decisions. Similar to what Gemma said, and the question you asked was, on camp, we probably give them opportunities to practice it. We put them in the scenarios. We have situations where players are selected from all different teams all over the country, playing different styles, different ways. We try to give them some ideas and some ideas of how we want them to play and how we want them to impose themselves on the opposition.
Okay, thank you. We're going to go on to the next video now and just have a little look at, I believe, Gemma, if you want to talk us through this again.
Yeah, definitely. So this is, I guess, the context for this is this was when the team were preparing to play Spain in a completely, different context. So Spain, we're going to look at some footage later on in the webinar around Keira Walsh and the role that she played in this game. So this is us in a 4-3-3. Okay, so this would be our preferred system with one pivot and then two in advance. And the Spain game, the context with this in terms of challenges tactically was different. So Spain played a 4-diamond-2 in the first half in this game. And then they played 4-3-3 in the second half. So even just that understanding of, within the game, like Justin said, the decisions that the players are making, you can prepare them for what you think is going to happen. But actually recognizing, formation changes in games is a challenge for all our players, but certainly in the create the attack phase. So here we're playing with a pivot, and this movement or this annotation was set for the Spain game. So you can see here the single pivot, the number 4 position. And really just to emphasize the connections between the players. So when we're building with the right centre half, the connection between the 4 and the 8, and how I'll just go back there, and how the 11 comes in field. So it's about creating connections. And in this game in particular, Keira Walsh is playing in the 4 position. And Jill Scott's playing in the 8 position, but it's really understanding the strengths of the players. When we play with a single pivot, Keira probably plays that position more so at the moment, and just understanding her natural attributes, and we'll see it in the clips. But I wanted to emphasize that. So the player connections are key, and it's the same on the opposite side as well. So as it plays through, if it's the right centre half or the left centre half, the players understanding, and Jimmy, you talked about it, that timing of movement. So recognizing that we want to build through the pivot, but actually if forward passes are on into the 9 and 10, then we take those passes. But it's just really understanding. You can see that the opposite side, 7 and 11. So if the ball was with the left centre half, the opposite side player would come into the pocket, and that would create the options for those connections in the create the attack phase, as we felt we could really exploit, Spain in those pockets. And then finally, just as a principle, and Justin touched on it, it's how we want to play, and it's a principle. One of the final principles for the team is 2 in behind and 2 off the front. So just understanding that principle for, she's gone back there. Just go back to that final principle there. The 2 off the front and 2 in behind is a principle for the team. And that's a really important principle for the team to understand. So again, it's playing within the principles that you want to play in, but it's also recognizing how to exploit the opposition. In this game in particular, I remember the Spanish fullbacks were really playing man-to-man against our players. So that was why the 7-11 movements inside were really important. You'll see in some of the clips that Jill Scott did really well at running in the spaces that were left by the 7-11s. So, when you talk about the attributes of Keira, so Keira played in the 4 position, and her I guess absolute super strength is getting on the ball in her technical range. But Jill's attribute is the timing of her run and exploiting spaces into the back line. And I think you'll see that when we look at the clips.
Thank you. Really, really interesting, graphic there, Gemma, and for you, Justin. So really, and for the learners on the course that are listening to this and going to take in, it's about knowing and understanding the characteristics of your players. and then because you're asking them to do, you want to be asking them to do something that they're capable of doing, and not putting them into a position where they might struggle to do that. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry, Gemma.
No, definitely. I think it's a really key point. So for anyone who watches Keira Walsh play, one of her outstanding attributes is receiving under pressure, and the confidence that she has when she receives under pressure. And her confidence comes from her technical ability and her ability to want the ball under pressure, but actually she knows where the pressure is, but the actual technical execution of where she takes her first touch, along with her ability to play longer passes as well. So it's a mix really, but understanding what Keira brings to the team is very different to the Brazil clip when you had Jordan and Izzy in that role. So, understanding those strengths is absolutely key.
Justin, anything to add to that?
No, it's key. One of the things when you select players for the national team, you're trying to blend the different characteristics and put them into the system that a team plays and the style that a team plays, and hope they work off each other. So when you talk about central midfield players and 4, 8 and 10, it's important to get the right blend. And as Gemma was speaking, it made me think about the differences with midfield players when you play as a single pivot and as a double pivot, and the ability to adapt slightly and what it means to you in specific games. Being able to play off someone if it's a 4 and an 8 who are playing close together, or as a single pivot where you've got probably more responsibility centrally to get the game going and get your team moving the ball forward. So yeah, there's so many challenges that the game presents, especially in the middle of the pitch. And in the middle of the pitch, I'd like to say that's where you need your intelligence, where you need your brains and your technical players to play the way we want to play.
So I'm looking at that and I'm listening to both of you, and Gemma with the graphic that you showed there. I would say that what you're trying to achieve in your sessions, there's some simple stuff, but it's got loads and loads of detail, and that would impact in your practice design when you've got the girls on camp, which we'll talk about a bit later on.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think it comes back to the simple detail, but the actual fundamentals, the fundamental skills and attributes of that position, which I know we're going to come on to talk about.
Yeah, have we got the next clip, which is the Spain clip? So basically, we're going to talk about this, the skills and attributes, which we've already touched on, really. So what skills and attributes does central midfield require in order to overcome the challenges that the game presents? Obviously, you two guys are working at the top level with, playing against some of the best girls in the world, Gemma, where you're concerned, and Justin, some of the best young lads in the world or Europe that you play against. So, what is it? What's the skills and attributes that those central midfielders would need? Gemma, I think this is another clip from the Spain game. Is that right?
Yeah, so just with this footage, just as you're getting tuned into it, we're playing in red in this game and Spain are in white. So just recognising, and this is us playing in the 4-3-3. So the animation that we talk through, you can see here, you can see Keira, so the left centre half's on the ball. Now Keira's when you talk about those attributes, Keira naturally attracts players to the ball, because I think it's fair to say most opposition don't want Keira to get faced up and be able to play forward. So in terms of her attributes, her willingness to always be open to receive the ball and look to play forward, her technical, the technical fundamentals of her receiving skills, receiving under pressure, recognizing the pressure. Keira spends a lot of time preparing her space. And she's constantly changing that as well. And you can see that in these clips. There's not a moment really where once she's played the ball, she's then looking, for the next part as well. So I think looking through these clips, you can start to see even just the levels of confidence that Keira has in her ability to receive the ball at the highest level and look to play forward to have an impact on games. I think it'd be worth saying for the people watching this, there was a clip that we couldn't use in this, and it was from this year's She Believes tournament against Japan, and it's in one of the goals, and she's absolutely she's pivotal in that, in terms of her confidence to receive, play forward, and then her range of passing is another part to her game. If we move on to the next clips, you can see that the other parts to the animation as well. So you'll see Jill staying away and how we look to make those connections with centre midfield. But when you have Keira in that position, she's there and she's able to, there's an example of her and her range, which gets us into dangerous areas where you can see that the role of the 8 and the 10 is to join in with the other players. And I think we've got one more as well. Again, of how we build and make those connections. But you know, the role of the 8 and the 10 staying away, but playing in between lines to give opportunities to play forward. And I think we've got one more clip. Yeah, here it is. So again, just watching Kira in the center of the pitch, you can see that she's always adjusting her position in relation to where the ball is. Her ability to play around corners first time like that is you know, like you say, in terms of the attributes, her technical attributes. And that was the run of Jill Scott there we were talking about, you know, when the corner runs that Jill makes, which, you know, again, going back to that point, and I know we're going to talk about it more, but Justin talked about blending players together. Kira and Jill play at club level together, which is great for the national team because their understanding is, you know, of what they're good at. So Kira tends to create things for Jill to, you know, utilize her super strengths of getting onto the ball, traveling with the ball, running into the back line, which then brings other players in.
Great clips, Gemma, and you know, very, very well explained in my opinion. So I just wanted to go back to this first clip here, and you talk about Kira and her receiving skills, and for the learners on the course, and we talk about fine detail. You know, it's an A license course. It's a level 4 course, and you should be looking at the detail. So just have a little look if we can just run it through, and I just want you to have a look at how the disguise on Kira. She goes to get the ball. They know she wants the ball. They don't want her to have the ball, but the little right, if you stop it there, that's fine. The bit there where she just literally does both the players at the same time. They know it's coming. They absolutely know it's coming, but they can't do anything about it. So it's just a shift of the hips. It's a shift of the shoulders that do it. And it's also, you know, you talk about the skills and attributes, and we also talked about characteristics earlier on. She's a brave player to do that, but would also, I would think, would back herself. And equally, the pass is vitally important. If the pass comes in too heavy, it could, you know, kill the move as such, and Kira might not be into a position where she can actually play forward. But from my point of view, I think that's excellent. So for me there, you get a player understanding of each other as well, and the needs and wants of players as I see it. So, and equally could talk about cues and triggers as well. Okay. Justin, anything? I know Gemma and I have taken over a bit there, but have you got anything to add on that in terms of like the finer detail?
Yeah, I think in that clip, you could say it's a risky pass. To some people, to some players, they might not want to receive it there because it's high risk, you're under pressure. But the type of players that we want to produce and have and coach are the players who can receive in them areas. They don't have to do it every single time because it's easier to receive in space. But then we want to develop the players that have the characteristics to receive under pressure, to turn and play forward, to eliminate 2 players out of the game. So I think it's important that as A licensed coaches that we're working with the players and stripping it back a little bit to work on how do they get to that stage where they can receive it there, mark, turn and play forward.
Okay, so really we just talked around the skills and attributes of the central midfield players in order to overcome those challenges. I think the videos have been, in a way, they're self-explanatory, but it's about the devil is in the detail, and I think that you guys have really been able to explain that very, very well. If we just move on, so everyone will know about the 4 corner model, and there's lots of things in there that would come out from the role of the central midfielder. Justin, can I just go to you really and talk about, you know, what do you think the key attributes would be for the central midfielder that comes into your group of players? What are they?
Such a good question, Jim. I could probably talk for an hour on it. I'll try to go through it briefly, but jump in at any stage. So The first thing is, do the players recognise where the space is? Okay, so in my opinion, I'm looking at a midfield player, I'm seeing, does he recognise where the space is? When kids are very young, they just run towards the ball. They just want to get on the ball. As they start getting older and become more fine-tuned, the players that we're looking at, I'm looking to see if they recognise where the space is. Once they've recognised where the space is and they're in eye contact with the passer or who's going to maybe give them the ball, you're looking at their body shape, Jim. You're looking at to see what sort of position are they in. Are they able to see as much of the pitch as they can? Are they constantly scanning, having glances, looking? Are they aware of what's around them? Once they're aware and they've got the right body shape, then it comes down to obviously taking that picture, taking in as much information as you can. But as the ball's coming towards you, your receiving skills now come into effect. Can you receive it on the back foot? Can you receive it and turn both ways? When we played against Spain, it was fascinating to see how well the Spanish players were able to receive and take it and go both ways. Not always two-footed, but definitely two-sided. Definitely able to go off the left foot, go off the right foot. Play with a dominant foot, but turn off both feet. So I think that's really important. And when you look at the psychological characteristics, especially the midfield player, I played there at the lower levels, Jim, and when I didn't have a picture, when I wasn't aware, so awareness being a characteristic, when I wasn't aware, maybe I started panicking, maybe I took the safe option. So being aware of what's around you. People talk about perception, people talk about taking a picture. I think being aware, it leads to being composed, which leads to, I used to say to the kids, like when you're very aware, you're at peace with the ball. The best players that I've seen play in the middle of the pitch, Busquets and Pirlo in particular, that stand out over the last 15 years, I think they're so composed that they're at peace with the ball because they know what's around them, they're aware. And like Gemma mentioned earlier, in Kira, she's very confident in her technical ability. She's got the tool set to get out of trouble. She's got the tool set to bounce it. She's got the tool set to turn. So how can we help develop the players, first and foremost, to recognise space and get in the right body position? Secondly, how aware are they? How many pictures have they taken? Do they glance? Do they look? Are they assessing all the information that's around them? And then thirdly, the actual receiving of the ball. Are they able to receive it, stop it dead? Are they able to move it off the line? Are they able to push it out of their feet? Are they able to play first time? Are they able to turn both ways? And they're the things that most coaches have got lots of little practices and lots of little sessions that they can do to really help the young players in England develop these key receiving skills that help them and will help the national teams and going forward.
Thanks, Justin. So Gemma, just for the learners that will be watching the video, if we talked around decision making, controlling direction, speed of play, I think in a way, without putting too bigger emphasis on, I think that clip with Kira shows that in its entirety. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it, in terms of Kira's attributes and her decision making and speed of play, it's all built on a fundamental skills and attributes that she has around receiving and passing. But the detail of that, and thinking about it in, I guess, linking into what Justin said, the before, during and after phase. So Kira's before phase is absolutely key because she's doing what Justin said. She's scanning and she's looking and she's got pictures. She's got picture number 1, picture number 2, picture number 3, but her technical ability allow her to execute all of those pictures, and she controls play. If you see her getting it sometimes, and if it's not quite on, she'll give it back where it's come from and she'll adjust her position. So she's almost dictating and controlling the game based on her scanning ability, her ability to recognize space. But I think that's where I place a big emphasis on that. Some people call them brilliant basics, but the fundamentals of the game, passing and receiving, if you are a central midfield player, but actually thinking about how we coach it. And I know we're going to talk about practice design. What is the finer detail in that before phase? So if it's recognizing the space, then moving into the space, the timing of moving into the space, moving into the space, not getting it, moving into another space. When they're scanning, almost checking, when working with younger players, what are they seeing? Do they arrive too early? Do they arrive too late? So it's almost that when we talk about the finer detail and giving, I guess, thinking about how they receive. And, Kira in particular, like Justin said, it looks like a risky pass, but knowing the players on your team, it's not for her. Knowing that you can give Kira that pass and she's able to, she's able to take it in terms of how she receives because she understands where the pressure is.
Great, that's fantastic. Also, if we think about this psychological corner, which we're heavily looking at this moment, I'm going to use the word bravery. How do you coach bravery?
I'll tell you, well, how you coach bravery, it's not exactly you're measuring bravery, or today's the bravery session, but I do think that it's about creating an environment where kids are not afraid to make mistakes and not afraid to try things. And, that they feel free. They feel free when they play, especially with the younger players, older, in fact, with everyone. But yeah, you want your midfield players not to feel tense, not to feel scared, not to feel frightened when they're receiving the ball in the middle of the pitch. Years ago, we used to miss out the middle of the pitch, just missed it out because it was high risk. So now we want players to turn and play and play forward. So in terms of coaching bravery, I'm not sure there's a bravery session, but I do think that the way you set your environment up, the type of information you give the players, the emphasis that you do when you can demand creativity, you can demand players to be, we want you to get the ball. Go on, get in, play forward every time. Try and play forward every time you get it. Give them little cues, give them little signals, put little conditions on their game. That helps players take that risk and recognise that playing forward and taking out opposition with your passing or your dribbling is key to winning football matches. Because it's an invasion game, Jimmy. We've got to get as close to the goal as we can. Yeah. So passing it sideways and backwards isn't going to get us as close to the goal as possible. The more players we've got who can turn and play forward and penetrate with passing and running, then the better we'll be, and the more chances we'll create.
It's interesting to both yourself, Gemma, and Justin, that years gone by, you'd hear, certainly from I'm a lot older than you two, but the old managers, don't you dare bring it down there, just hook it on and all those types of things, So I think it's really, really important that and you've mentioned it just in there, and Gemma, I know it goes on in your field of work there, where you're trying to set up the environment. And again, I'll urge the listeners on this course and on this call to make sure that they set up the environment to do that. And equally, the practice design, the structured chaos within the practices that allow them to take those risks or make those mistakes as well. But it's what you allow them to do as the coaches in order to take that chance that will hopefully bear fruits to them and to you and the team and the national teams as we go forward, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure. It's just the message is the players can see when you mean it or not. The players know when you want them to play or when you want them to shell it. I played Jimmy in the lower leagues, and it'd be like first 10, turn them. It'll be 78 minutes, we're still turning them. We never ever got it down to play. So, the message is when the coach really wants you to play and believe in it, it'll give you that belief. And when you talk about psychological characteristics, bravery, I think confidence, I think belief that you can do it, you make a mistake, but you get it again. How do you encourage that? And I think it's important for coaches, definitely important for coaches to encourage the players to keep going even after a mistake and not be safe all the time.
Gemma, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think just to link with Justin's point, in terms of working, so this season I've been working with the under-15s, and it's almost explaining the why to them. So if you want to create habits and help them to be the best they can be, we used a phrase, the only mistake is not making one. Now you really got to understand and live that phrase, because if I say to them the only mistake is not making one, I want to explain to them why, because when you are an under 15 and you're 14 years old, mistakes are going to help you learn quickly. So it's almost like seeing through what you say. So if they do make mistakes and I react in a way that doesn't support that statement, then they see through me. So she's like, she says the only mistake's not making one, but then she reacts like this. So it's almost like putting that emphasis on accelerating their learning and really like believing in it, and when they do make mistakes, helping them through it, because the from a psychological point of view, that resilience, you'll see it. We've seen the clips of Kira, but there'll be clips of Kira where it doesn't work, and it's then her resilience to go, I can do this, I can adapt to it. And I think they're the real brave moments, because to say the only mistake is not making one is a real brave thing to kind of go out there, because you're like, wow, so we're going to make them. But like Justin said, it's an invasion game. Mistakes will be made every 30 seconds, but it's how resilient we can be to, creating those habits to say they're going to happen. Let's get on. Let's do it again. If a mistake happens, the quicker we can react to that and move on, the more successful we're going to be.
So just to sum that up before we go on to Justin's animation, if we are looking and linking practice design into what we do, we need to provide the players with the problems, but as the coach, you need to know how to solve the solution or have the solution to the problem. Yes, you can let the players work it out, but I'm hoping, again, with the people on this call, that they need to have the solution for that problem.
Yeah, I agree there, Jim. Jim, one more thing. Am I okay to say one more thing on this?
Yeah, by all means, Justin, of course.
Yeah, so Jim, I just think with the central midfield players, I think like people may disagree, but I think the best ones as well assess risk. So I hear a lot of people talking about, oh, they've got to receive it under pressure, receive it under pressure, receive it under pressure. But if you can receive it not under pressure and turn, attract pressure, then play past that pressure, you get beyond lines quicker. I don't know if I'm explaining it properly, but key psychological characteristic is assessing risk. I think some of the best players assess the risk. They know what decision to make. I had a few young players previously that they didn't always assess risk, and they end up making the wrong decision a lot of the time, and they didn't learn from it. So we just got to be careful about what we're putting out there. But we want to help the players make the decisions themselves. Yes, we want to know the answers to a certain extent, but they've got to feel it themselves and feel that was the right decision there. I should have done that, or maybe I could have done that, rather than us almost giving them the answers.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying there, Justin, totally. You know, you're spot on there with that. And I agree with that feeling. Should we go on to your animation, Justin, and you can explain about the pivot, and we can talk around the role of the you know, the side diamond, really.
Yeah, this is okay. So we played Spain, and we played a diamond formation, and we got a single pivot, and they defended a lot of the time in the mid block. So they didn't really come after us, and they defended in the mid block. So we asked the pivot at times to make a back three. If we play the video, I'll talk through it. So centre half split, the pivot drops in, the fullbacks get a little bit higher. But the role of the 10 and the 2 side diamond is to keep the opposition midfielders away. You saw that in Gemma's clips as well. So if they can stay away now, it creates more space for maybe the centre half to step in. But we ask some midfielders to connect. So any one of the 3 midfielders can come and connect and turn and play forward. And our centre forwards are looking to go in behind. Unfortunately, I'm not able to show you the video, but we had a really good clip from the game against Spain where it worked. This one's slightly different. This is when the pivot decides to stay behind the opposition's line of pressure. So ultimately, if he can stay behind because there's depth between the 2 units, so we can get him turned, that works for us. So it's the same principle. Players stay away. We talk about players sharing the pitch. So we're sharing the pitch, making it harder for their defenders to cover. And then we're looking for the connecting midfielders, fluid movement, interchange to try and create that overload. As you can see, it looks a bit like a 4 versus 2. We played Spain twice, and in both games we had the lion's share of possession, and was able to overload them in central areas. And it's just a key thing for that pivot. The boy who played there, and we've got 2 or 3 who can play that position for us. That pivot, he assesses where the space is. So if the space is behind their midfield, behind their 2 forwards, he can stay behind. If he feels it's the right time to drop in, he can drop in, and we split. And like I mentioned earlier, everyone else reacts off the movements that we do. It's not prescriptive. It's not he goes there and he goes there. By the way, I've never lost on animations. You know, I've never lost on an animation. But, you know, so it's not salt and pepper pots, A to B, C to D. It's about players reacting off each other. And what I've found is when you put a lot of good players together, they tend to work it out themselves. They do tend to work it out themselves. They share the pitch. We give them a few ideas, but they work it out themselves. We need players who can problem solve and work things out themselves. This was just a little an example of the role of that central midfielder in terms of the pivot, and also the role of the side diamond to basically try and play behind the opposition, or sometimes underneath the opposition, and connect and combine to release the forwards and to release the high fullbacks. I hope that makes sense.
Brilliant, perfect sense, Justin. Can we go back to the first clip of the animation, if possible? We got that?
Yeah.
We're talking about the pivot here, Just, and Gemma, please join in on this. So if we can just move the animation, can we, and then stop it now? That's great. So look, we talked about the skills and attributes. So I'm looking at the pivot player in particular. What's his mindset or her mindset got to be when they're playing in this role, in this position? Because I've seen the person that springs to mind is Calvin Phillips, the lad at Leeds United, and Leeds United play this way sometimes under Bielsa, and he does it unbelievably well. Gemma, Justin, unbelievably well. So I'm just trying to think, what with the England 16s or 15, 16, 17s, what is it you want from this player, and what are you trying to develop when they come on camp?
Okay, so when they come on camp, it's just an extension. The clubs do the majority of the work. So when they come on camp, we're just trying to create an environment where they feel comfortable to play like how they've been playing for their clubs. Just maybe raise it up a notch and play the style that we want to play if it's slightly different. The role of the pivot, Jim, in answer to your question, he has to be football bright. I don't have a description for it. Sorry, I don't know what I mean. I know what I mean by it, but I'll try and explain it a little bit. But he needs to be football bright in a sense of he sees pictures, he understands where the space is, he understands who might be the spare player, he understands who might have the most time and space. And ultimately, he's able to execute a range of passing and show distribution, the right side, the right weight, the right speed, detail in terms of his passing. So football bright, intelligent players. And also, I know we smell create the attack, but they also have to have an understanding of their role out of possession. They can't just be an in possession player and out of possession we're playing with 10. That's not the case. It's a key position, Jim.
And I think that's really important what you've just said there. This is create the attack, we get it, and it's not an out of possession situation, but there's always a transition in the game, as we know. Just with the 9 and the 2 9s as such as you've got up there, Just, what are you looking for them to do?
Score.
Are you looking for them to stretch the pitch though, to make the pitch?
Yeah, Jim, I like playing with 2 centre forwards. I do like we picked this system not because of the personnel that we had at the time. We play different systems, but the same style. But the number 9s, I like them to go in behind and threaten the opposition. We've got a tendency for players to come to feet and get on the ball and entertain. But I like players who try to stretch the game and get in behind and score. I think young players, they've got to take the most pleasure from scoring goals. So the 2 9s are really, they have license to come and connect because they can play off each other. If the 9 comes to feet, the 10 might go or the side diamond might go. But really, I want them to be thinking about, getting into goal scoring positions.
And if you're playing a mid block, Gemma, it'd be interesting to see if you're playing a mid block and the 2 9s can operate higher up the pitch in order to, occupy a back 4. What might that allow you to get in midfield?
I think it's just an understanding of how your tactics, create space and give space for you. So one of the principles in the Brazil game was, the principle of 2 in advance and 2 in front. And it's just that variety. It's that opposite coordinated movement, like the timing of your movement and the opposite coordinated movement is really the key. And going back to the question that you asked Justin about those attributes and what would you want from, your midfielders when they come on to, so the under 15s that I'm working with, Justin's right. It is about giving them opportunities to express themselves, but also refine some of those things. So in terms of their receiving skills at international level, the pace of play, being aware of and having exceptional receiving skills. And one of the principles, that we work to is look forward, play forward. So within that principle of play, look forward, play forward, your body position is absolutely key. So just, I guess, recognizing and, some of the practices that we deliver, how they allow the players to practice those things. So deliberate practice of, getting in the right body position, putting constraints on your practice. Everyone will do it, but, a constraint that we have is when you receive the ball, being in a position to see the ball in the goal. And it puts your side on, but it's just a different way of getting your messages across to players, but ultimately the fundamentals of body shape, receiving skills, your ability to pass the ball and, you disguise your different types of passes. They're the bits that you're really trying to bring out.
So we've just put this clip up for you, for the learners, really, just to, what are the skills and attributes and we've talked about receive and stay on the ball. We've talked about decision making, and control the direction of play. So, what the reason we've left the question marks there for you guys, the learners on the course, is, what is it? How does this reflect in your environment? What does it mean to you, and what does it mean to your club? regarding and around what you want from your central midfielders in possession from a technical and tactical point of view. And again, if we talk about underpinning knowledge of coaches, and that's you guys that I'm talking to on the course. So you talk about a technical characteristic. Now, this is just language from a slide deck and a descriptor from the national teams. So they talk about a technical characteristic of receive and stay on the ball. And then it drops down into a definition of that. And then there's an underpinning detail. So the underpinning detail then really breaks it down in terms of what the coach wants from his or her player, as I see it. So just literally have a look at that again and see what it looks like in your environment and what you can take for that from that slide. So if we move on, we're gonna move on, and we've talked a lot about it in terms of practice design, Gemma, Justin, and we've put this one up, which has been done by Stuart Delaney, myself, and I don't want to talk loads and loads through it, but it's a simple message, and there's a logical sequence and a consistency about how we do this. So it was something we've done on the A license before, and what I want to do, I want to leave it to the learners to look at and come back to you two to talk about practice design in a minute. But just from my point of view, for the learners, there's a coaching cell 1, which is the main coaching piece. And there's a coaching cell 2, which then uses the other players that are not involved in the session. So, long gone are the days where you leave players out, stood on the touchline. Justin, Gemma, I'm sure you're very, very good at making sure you use everybody. And how can you replicate what's going on in the middle, on the outside, on the peripheral bit, and make everybody feel a part of it? So, I would ask you to have a look at this, read it, and then basically take away from it what you will. This is just one practice design. It's not right, it's not wrong, but it helped certainly from where I come from a club point of view, it helped an individual midfield player who was absolutely unbelievably talented break into the first team at the club I've just come from before and actually get himself a loan deal out in Portugal, which I think will be very good for him. If I just go back to Gemma and yourself, Justin, what does practice design look like for you two on camp?
Was it not on camp? So I can take it back a little bit. I'll be quick, Jim. If I'm talking too much, just jump in.
No,
so previously, I had loads of different practices, loads of different drills and possessions and mini goals and people on the outside and magic players and float, all that. And then, but toward the back end of my time at Spurs, I changed a lot of it. I just did simple, basic practices and did it a lot of the time because the players I had to look at the practices and look at and refine them to say, do they replicate what happens in the game? And they may have looked. I may have seen how it connected to the game, but some of the times the players didn't. So now, fast forward a few years, a lot of the practices I do now look like the game. We've had a lot of game type situations, even numbers, 2 goals, offside, and just try to make it really, really simple for the players. Obviously, change the numbers, maybe have people on the outside, but just have lots to try and coach within the game scenario because you then get into the players are getting to practice what they're going to come up against in the game, directional things like that. So I'm sure a lot of the coaches know this, but it's just something. So, in answer to your question, long-winded way is on camp. It's game-based sessions.
Thank you, Justin. Gemma.
I'm trying not to sound like really boring and just repeat what Justin just said, but it's exactly the same. The more basic, the better. In terms of one of the things that I've learned working with players is repeating practices is a good thing. In terms of where you can get to within the practice and repeating practices, but maybe changing a couple of the constraints. So just slightly twisting the focus. If you've got a practice that works, and Jimmy, your middle session there is one of my favorite practices in terms of the amount of times I use that setup for a number of things in terms of like the timing of the movement for the 9 dropping into the space or, the centre halves playing out from the back. So as well as it's like understanding the returns, because that middle practice without trying to my interpretation of it is you can get so much out of it from your centre half, from your midfield rotation, from the timing of the 9. So it's about having a set number of practices for me that are basic, but they're game related. And the position specific element of it. So I'm sure it's deliberate where you've put that practice on the pitch, but it's the same as Justin. Like it's basic. It's like it's what's going to help the players. How can I simplify my messages? And I was always nervous about repeating practices, and then I'm not nervous about it now. The players, when you get a good practice, the players will get excited about the practice, and the slight changes you make will completely change their perception of the practice. That's what I found with the under-15s this year, especially I guess at international level. It's a little bit different because when we don't see them for a couple of months, that connection back to a practice is even more important, because if we constantly do new things, some of the players will come in August and see them again in October, and we'll have no reference of doing the session in August. So you're worrying about coming up with the next, whizzy practice when actually it's all there, in terms of fundamental basics.
Thank you. So if we talk about the 3 R's, which you two guys know oh so well, the realism, relevance and repetition, certainly going back to what you've just said, Gemma, about, you don't see them for so many weeks and then they've forgotten really what happened. So if you talk about the repetition of a practice, and also, if I'm allowed to say it to both of you, I don't think she's ever apologised for talking about basics, because for me, anything I ever do, I don't need to jazz it up. The game is simple. It's hard enough to play the game for the players to play, but we need to keep simplifying the practices in order for the outcomes to, for it to work and for them to see it, the fundamentals of the game. So that really brings us to a conclusion from the role of the central midfielder in create the attack. I'd like to thank yourself, Gemma, and Justin for your input today, and hope that the learners who watch the video take something from it and are able to understand what we've brought across today and get something out of this session today. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it.
Thank you.